So thank you very much for the invite for tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about fairy lights and fatigue, which seems quite appropriate at the moment, being it's the time of year. Just to sort of let you know a little bit about me. So as Nikki said, my role is centre head in the Maggie's in Cardiff. And my background is I was a clinical nurse specialist in oncology for urology patients for many, many years prior to coming to Maggie's. Fatigue's got a particular interest for me because lots and lots of people that I see in the centre really struggle with it. And the descriptions that people walk into the centre with each and every day about how the impact it has on them is something that I'm really intrigued by. So trying to sort of create some workshops to help people sort of understand the symptoms and how they can manage this a little bit better is something I'm really sort of passionate about. As Nikki said, if you've got any questions, then just pop them in the chat. I've got a few from that people have already submitted, and I'm more than happy as we go through to take any questions at the end, if that's okay. So the aims of what we're going to try and have a little look at today is just to have a think about how fatigue, understand how fatigue is and how it can affect us. To have a little think about how it impacts you and the impact on your life, and to just have a little think about how we can explore and discuss some coping strategies. The only thing I would say is right at the beginning is I haven't got a magic wand. I wish I did. I wish I could just say that if you do this, these are the things that will help. And some of them will, but actually it's a process to being able to sort of manage some of those symptoms. So fatigue is the definition that I've got is that it's a distressing, persistent, subjective sense of tiredness or exhaustion that's related to an illness or its treatment that's not proportional to recent activity and interferes with usual functioning. And I know that's a very, very long quote, but it's really interesting when I break it down with lots of the visitors that I see that actually just picking up on that, it's persistent. It doesn't matter what activity you've done through the day. There's no sort of rhyme or reason to it. And it's that sense of exhaustion. So it's something that there's not really an answer to, but it's about just noticing that it can be something that just appears. So thinking a little bit about how fatigue can affect you, from some of the questions that we've had through, it's just interesting to sort of be able to think about how it affects us individually, how it affects our families, how it can affect us in relationships, how sometimes family members don't understand it. And very often I do invite family members to come to the session in the centre because I think it gives them a really good understanding of what the impact of fatigue is and why sometimes, a good nap doesn't always cut it. And I think that's really important. So some of the causes of fatigue then, to think about it from a perspective of treatment. So it can be that the surgery, the chemotherapy, radiotherapy, or whatever hormonal treatments that you're on, the actual cancer itself, things like anaemia. So very often patients have different treatments that can affect their blood count, and the anemia can obviously cause fatigue. If you think about some of the treatments that people are having, sometimes they have lack of appetite, changes in taste and nausea. And therefore, if you're not eating properly or you're just not feeling your body's not getting the calories that it needs. I think we underestimate pain quite a lot in relation to fatigue. Very often, visitors that I see in the centre will be describing that, and it may not be a pain related to cancer. It could be something they've had previously. It could be arthritis or something, but chronic pain has a huge impact on patients with fatigue. Some of the medications that we take can sometimes cause us to feel really sleepy, to feel really sort of low, a little bit low in mood sometimes because of the fact that we can't do what we did before. Breathlessness, the psychological impact of fatigue, which is something that most people don't take into account. The impact of a cancer diagnosis itself, ongoing treatment, all of those impacts affect our emotion, and they can lead on to anxiety, which is understandable. Anxiety can lead to overwhelm and sometimes be feelings of low mood. There's a lot of guilt around it about that we should be, could be, and I used to be able to do it, so why can't I do it now? And that can cause lots of stress. And sometimes I say to people, we're really kind sometimes to other people, but when it comes to ourselves, we're not that kind. And we use lots of really difficult words about, I should be able to do things. I ought to do it, why can't I do it? And those difficult thoughts can lead to some sort of distressing and cause us to sort of underestimate the impact of treatment, I suppose. For this slide, I would say this is probably one of the biggest things. Lots of people talk to me about the physical side of fatigue, the impact of treatment, the impact of having to go back and forth to the hospital several times a day, or several times a week, that, just getting up and getting out of bed. But very often, I think the emotional and psychological side of fatigue is underestimated and probably forgotten about. People underestimate the fact that when they've had that cancer diagnosis, sometimes, very often, people understandably want to get on with treatment. They want to know what's going to happen. They want to know how they can move forward with their treatment plan. And the emotional impact of what's just happened and that information that you've just been given very often takes a little while for people to process, for people to start to accept and understand that. So I think the impact of all those things takes a little while to process. Some other things that impact our fatigue, so the physical concerns, so things like activities of daily living, the basic things that we did before, so that self-care stuff, that productivity, things that we used to do for ourselves. People find mental concerns with regards to fatigue, before word finding. Very often people find it really difficult to remember things. They have trouble with word finding if they've had chemotherapy or different types of treatment. But just sometimes it can be just the mental load of having treatment, going through all of that and trying to sort of understand why that fatigue is so huge. I see people that have sometimes gone back into employment and obviously trying to manage a cancer diagnosis alongside trying to work. Sometimes if people have been off for a year or so, things change all the time. Managing computer systems, managing colleagues, managing friends, it's a huge thing. Financial concerns for some people are a real worry, understandably, especially with the cost of living crisis and things that are happening at the moment. And the fact that all of these things impact on us. And even though it may be physically that we're not getting up and maybe doing a 5K every day, actually, if you look at all of these things that are on the screen, the impact of just some of these things will have a huge effect on us. The psychological impact, I would say, is something that, again, people just don't really think about it. Understandably, as I've said, most people want to just get on. They just want to get on with treatment, get their treatment done, know what they are, know their regular routine. But it's really important, and from a perspective of Maggie's, that's something that we work really closely with people about, is that there needs to come a time when people need to be able to express that concern and that worry. And that anxiety at some point will sort of reach a peak where people do need some support. Very often people describe that loss of identity. They used to be able to do all these things, and suddenly, the fact that they're relying on other people to help and support them causes lots of distress. Very often people describe future plans and social concerns. Most people say to me when they're struggling with fatigue that they find it really difficult to make plans. And then therefore they feel quite isolated because they don't want to make plans because they're worried that if the fatigue kicks in, then therefore they'll have to cancel. So the instinct is that they will withdraw from sort of their social circles. And again, we've talked a little bit about how family well-being is important and family want you to do things. But obviously there's a balance, isn't there? There's a balance between what you can do, what you should do, and how you can sort of find a way of just being present within the family, but also stepping back and looking after and thinking about conserving your energy. So this is quite a good analogy to think about. So before you were affected by fatigue, you drain your battery of energy by doing activity. And it didn't take too long to recharge your battery by having a good sleep. Since you've had the cancer or the treatment, you've been affected by fatigue, you've got a smaller battery of energy, and sleep doesn't always help to recharge your battery. I think most of us walk around with a mobile phone, and as soon as it gets to a couple of bars, we're very quick to put the charger in because we need that top up so that we can stay in contact with loved ones. But for ourselves, it's very different. It's almost as if we just keep going, we keep pushing ourselves to the point where actually, therefore, we've completely drained our battery, and it's going to take because your battery's small, it's going to take longer to charge. This slide's a bit busy, but I'm just going to talk you through it because it's a really good way. And hopefully the slides will be disseminated later so that, so family members can have a little look at this as well. So the starting point is that you're fatigued. So the instinct is that you rest and you do less. That leads to you sleeping more or less and you become less fit and you get less muscle strength. You develop more fatigue, and that leads you on to thinking more about your symptoms. So you do less, you rest more. Again, more fatigue. Again, muscle strength becomes less, and it's a cycle of you do even less, you rest even more. And then it becomes into anxiety. It's terrible. I won't cope. I can't cope. Won't get any better, which leads to the feeling helpless, hopeless, low mood, frustration, and anxious. And you do more when able and rest more at other times, which leads to more fatigue. When you're talking to, I talk to some of the patients that come in, it's very often that family members, it's that instinct, isn't it? Is that if you feel tired, the instinct is, well, you need to rest then, you need to sleep more. And that's important, but it's also important to try and think about actually the impact on your muscle strength and the fact that you're becoming less fit. So very often when we work with our colleagues, the OTs and the physios, the instinct is that they will say to you, actually, if you can do something a little bit each day and just allow that to continue, it just helps to break that cycle. Because the less you do, the less you want to do, and then it becomes like into that psychological loop, which is quite hard to sort of break out of. The boom and bust cycle is something that some people have heard of and some people haven't, but it's probably my favorite thing actually, because it just helps to keep people sort of in that zone where we want you to be. So the green zone is where we would want your activity level to be. So it's nice and balanced and he's very happy in there. What tends to happen is people who have fatigue, along with all the anxiety, the worry that they should do more, very often they'll have a good day. So what they'll do is they'll do 3 or 4 things that day, and they will go shopping, they'll meet friends for coffee, they will do lots of different things. So that good day, the next day will turn into a bad day because very often they've bust. All their energy levels have gone, they've literally have no energy, and a good day can turn into 3 bad days. So it's very important to try and think about how we can help you to stay in that green zone. It's really interesting because very often when I show this slide, people go, "Oh gosh, that's exactly what I do," which is quite keen. And I apologise because my dog is shouting in the background. So what can we do about it? We can use some coping strategies. We can talk to our family and friends, which I know is hard because sometimes it's frustrating, isn't it? Is that we feel that they should know, but sometimes I think that we're not very honest about how we actually feel, so therefore we try to push past that. Looking after ourselves, to be understanding and quite compassionate, is something that, again, very few people are good at. We're very good at looking after loved ones. We're very good at supporting family and friends. But when it comes to looking after ourselves, we just need a little bit of help and support. So the strategies that we would use for managing some fatigue are the 5 Ps. So thinking about the priorities. So what has to be done? How much energy will it use and what can you delegate? And this is really interesting because very often that conversation around can I delegate things? And very often we tend to keep things, as in I can do this. I'm able to do it. There's no reason why I can't do it. But actually, very often I'm sure that most of you have had lots of people that say to you, is there anything I can do for you? And actually some delegation is a really good way of sort of managing some of that fatigue. And it gives people a job. It helps other people to support you, which is a really key factor. By giving people a job, they feel, okay, well, I'm doing something, because some people are really good at the supportive side of things, but some people want to be more practically involved, and how can they help and support you in that way? How much energy will it use? I suppose it's that thing, isn't it? It's thinking about the hidden activity that you do. And that is where physical activity comes in. Very often when people talk about fatigue, sometimes it's enough to just get up out of bed, have a shower, come downstairs, and for most people they're spent when you've got a really chronic fatigue, they're spent for a little while, and they need a little bit of time to recover from that. Very often we forget about the hidden activity that we do. So things like, putting the hoover around, hoovering around. Sometimes it can be the pot, all those things, putting the washing in, taking the washing out, doing the ironing. All of those things require energy. And I think very often people think, well, I've only done a little bit of this. And actually, it's just thinking about, probably if you listed some of the things that you did in a whole day, there would be quite a few things in there that you probably hadn't realized that were there and are sort of taking a bit of your energy away. Planning is a really good way. So writing a list and thinking about, okay, what has to be done, and factoring in, hospital appointments, because hospital appointments, I know that you have to go for hospital appointments, but the energy that it takes to get to hospital appointments is the emotional and psychological, what's going to be said, what will I need to do, the getting there, all of those, who's going to take me, how much traffic, it's all of those things are taking your energy. So creating a list, but not a to-do list. It's very much about, because if you create a to-do list, sometimes if you haven't achieved what you need to achieve, that can then become even more frustrating, because people will say, well, actually, I've done nothing. So a lady that did the fatigue workshop with me, should I call mine the ta-da list? Actually, I've done a couple of things, so it's almost a bit of a tick and ta-da, I've done it. And that just changes the sort of mood, I suppose, in the fact that you have done something, rather than, oh no, I've done nothing again today. For some people, their energy levels are different at different times of the day. So it's keeping an idea of, okay, what's my good spot? So for some people, it's sort of after lunch, that's their good bit. Or for some people, it's first thing in the morning. And that'll be different for everybody. So it's about just trying to figure out over a period of time, where's my peak of energy? And actually that's the time when it is best to do things. An energy diary is something that an occupational therapist would use. And that's something, if somebody needs more one-to-one, it's a good way of sort of understanding about where their peaks and troughs are for the day. And they would work with them to be able to understand where they would plan things into their day. Pacing yourself is something that we're not very good at. So allowing extra time to get things done and rewarding ourselves when you have done that, and stopping before you can become overtired. I think it's really interesting. I had a lady that came to one of my fatigue workshops, and I said, oh, just tell me a little bit about what you've done over the last day. She said, well, I had a boost of energy, and actually I started to paint the kitchen. We went, okay, right. Did you pace yourself? Did you just do one more? She went, well, I started with one more, but then the energy was there. So I went and did the whole lot. And actually, the next 4 days she spent in bed. So just sort of chunking it down and actually thinking, well, what is it that I can achieve, so that you can see the results, but actually you don't become overtired. The permission one is something that most people find really difficult. So giving yourself permission to do things differently. And actually you can still do things, but it just might look slightly different to how it did before. And some of that is about actually loss, because in a way, if you think about, well, I used to be able to do it like this, but now I can't, that leads to frustration, all those thoughts that come with that. But this is about, yes, I can do things, it just might look slightly different. Learning to say no and tell others how you're feeling is a challenge, I would say, for most people. Some people are really good at it and others are not. But it's just about thinking about that self-preservation, isn't it? And it's about thinking back to that battery. You've only got a small amount of energy, and that battery can only hold that small amount of energy. So what are you going to do? What do you want to do with that energy? So it's about thinking in a slightly different way. So some of the unhelpful thinking then. So the mental fatigue, as we've talked about a little bit, is things like problems with concentration, probably problems with memory and difficulties in retaining new information, and forgetting how to do things that used to be automatic. And thoughts and feelings from the impact of cancer and fatigue on your life. So it can lead to anxiety, things like I can't cope, I feel bad, so it must be bad. It can lead to depression, that you feel that there's no point, frustration and anger. And all those negative thoughts are really unhelpful when you're trying to do things differently. So some thinking that can help with the doing, some coping statements. So instead of I can do this, I'm strong, I can cope. So just changing it slightly about changing the shoulds to could and must to might, just being that gentle talk with yourself. And I should wash up, or I should wash up, to I could wash up. I must speak to my friend, or I might speak to my friend. Just about being that gentle friend to yourself, I suppose, and setting realistic standards and expectations. So the benefits of physical activity, and we're not talking about a huge amount, we're just talking about some gentle, it could just be a 5 or 10 minute walk. The evidence shows that it helps to manage weight and improve fitness levels, aids in pain relief, helps to lower our stress levels, helps to manage insomnia and other sleep problems, improves self-esteem and sense of well-being, and helps us to regain some sort of control, reduces recurrence rates and manage long-term conditions, and aids in fatigue management. Most OTs that are working out of the sort of NHS will strive to say that actually resting is good, but there also needs to be an element of some physical activity, however small, and that's really, really important. So the top tips to avoid for physical activity is avoiding periods of inactivity, integrating activity into your daily routine. So thinking about those things that we talked about, the hidden things. So actually, if you're standing up, if you're doing a bit of ironing, and actually you are moving about, if you're loading up the washing, it's all of those things. So that's important to put into your daily routine. Setting timely and achievable goals, and gradually building up your activity levels. There are really good referral services from the National Exercise Referral Scheme that the GPs can refer people into. And they have cancer specialists, so patients can be referred in. They have a one-to-one with a cancer specialist who will be able to advise you about what physical activity you are able to do safely, and almost create like a specialized plan for you. And that's something that can be quite rewarding, because it integrates you into back out into the into the community, and into a sports centre or somewhere that you might think, oh gosh, I don't want to go there. But actually, it's really important to be able to sort of connect with other people. Do something that you enjoy and reward yourself. I think that's definitely the key. So things that are really important. So we talked a little bit about how not eating and not feeling as if you want to eat is a problem and can affect fatigue. But one of the things that the dietitian talks about is that small, frequent meals can be really, really important. Larger meals can be tiring. Understandably, family members want to feed us. So basically, when a huge plate of food is put in front of us, it can take a long time to eat, and it's tiring. So we say to people, a tea plate is a really good way of just being able to give people, something to eat and make sure that they're getting the nutrition that they need. But actually, the fact that it's a smaller plate means that people tend to have a better appetite with that. So planning ahead, being able to think about preparing foods while you're feeling active. So it's okay to have a ready meal. It's okay to be able to and this is where family and friends are really helpful. All those people that want to help, actually, if they want to cook something lovely for your tea, and that you can put it in the freezer, and that means that you've got a meal already prepared. It just means that if you need to take that extra bit of rest, or actually it means that you can go and enjoy something because you haven't got to come home and prepare tea, then that's great. Snacks are really good, and eating well and treating yourself is really, really important. Just a little bit about some of the things that we do in Maggie. So we've got drop-in sessions, cancer support and advice. We do have a nutrition who's a dietitian who actually comes into our centre, but she also does a Zoom workshop, which is great and really helpful for people when they're trying to figure out what it is that they can and can't eat, because lots of people are given lots of different advice. We do lots of different fitness classes, and all our classes are designed so that even somebody with fatigue can adapt, can definitely come into them, because we want people to start that feeling of that it's a community, that people can be able to exercise quite safely, and everything is just tailored to the individual to be able to help with that. We offer sort of relaxation, support groups, different sessions around fatigue and sleep. And obviously we've got our welfare and benefits officer as well.